I'm going to ask some folks to come up. Dan Levernier, who is the regional manager. Most of you know Dan. He's been the heart and soul of the Sacramento office, as well as Jim Hackett, who is our principal engineer. Ida Claire, who is our principal architect, coming up from the back. And let's see, who else was coming up? Was it? Oh, and George. George Barnes, there's George, and I'm going to get out of their way. What we're going to do now is take you through the process, and we want this to be a conversation. So please raise your hand at any time. We don't want to go into the weeds about your particular project. We'll do that this afternoon, and it'll be wide open. It's not that we want to shut you down. It's that we want to stay on a little bit higher level. We want to talk about general things as opposed to, I've got a project that I need help on. Although if you need to bring up an example, that's okay. But let's make sure we try to keep it on the survey level. So with that, Dan, I'm going to give you the, okay, and I'll get out of here.
Good morning. First, I'd like to introduce the staff that's here from the DSA Sacramento Regional Office, so you can put a name to a face if you don't already know him. First, I'd like to introduce Tim Powell. You can stand up. Tim is supervising architect. He supervises the fire and life safety and access plan review staff in DSA Sacramento Regional Office. And then next, Sal Duda. Where's Sal? Right here. He's supervising structural engineer. He supervises half the structural plan review staff in the regional office. And then Gary Reynolds, where's Gary? Over here. He's another supervising structural engineer. He supervises the other half of the structural plan review staff. Harlan Raymont is supervising architect. He supervises the intake staff, the staff that makes sure your projects are complete. Plus he also supervises the certification staff for at the end of the project when you get your project certified. So if you have any questions about certification, you can contact Harlan. Ann Mandela. Ann is, where's Ann? Oh, right in the back. Okay, she moved. Okay. So Ann is our administrative supervisor. She supervises all the administrative staff in the office. So if you have any questions about that, about processing of things through the office, she can help you with that. Stephen Ito is here, one of our senior structural engineers. Stephen is our intake structural engineer, so he makes sure the project's complete from a structural standpoint. We have an intake architect, senior architect, Eric Edgman. He couldn't be here today, but he also does intake reviews. And then we have two of our plan reviewers here, Greg Kobabe. Where's Greg? Right here. He's one of our fire and life safety plan reviewers. And then David Guerrero, senior structural engineer in the back. He's one of our structural plan reviewers. So if you have questions, particularly with the supervisors, can help you on answering any of your questions within the office. So DSA does responsibilities check, talked about a lot of stuff. Headquarters office does code development and other policies. But in the regional offices, we primarily do three things: structural review, fire and life safety review, and access compliance review, in addition to field oversight during construction. So we request that you submit 3 sets of drawings and specs for projects, and so that the reviews can be done concurrently. Not all projects require all 3 reviews, and if you're not sure if your project requires all the reviews or not, you can talk to one of the supervisors that I just introduced. If you have an unusual site or program, we encourage you to talk to DSA real early, just when you're starting to conceptualize your project. If you got a critical time frame, that's important to talk to us early so we can get input very early in the project. Chet talked about certified projects, and a lot of districts are getting their old projects certified. One of the ramifications, if you have an application that's not certified for a building, is that DSA cannot approve alterations to that building. So it's important to get all your projects certified. We do have a publication on that, projects, old uncertified projects that would block you from getting new projects done. It's an interpretation of regulations, IRA-20, take a look at that. So if you've got an uncertified building, we can't approve the plans to do the alterations of the building to get that building certified. So it's really important when you're just starting your project, you look at the certification status of all your buildings in that project. And it may not just be the buildings you're doing work to. Any previous application that's required in order to make your new project code compliant is required to be certified. So if you're putting a new relocatable building down on your site and you're using accessible restrooms to serve that building in an existing building, then that building would need to be certified also. Not every building on the site needs to be certified to approve new projects, but things that would make that project code compliant. And we really encourage preliminary meetings when you're starting the schematic design phase. But even before that, there are projects that are exempt from DSA review and approval. So you might want to take a look at that. And if you're not sure, call our office, talk to one of the supervisors, talk to me to determine if your project is exempt. There are projects that are exempt based on project cost, and there are projects that are exempt based on scope, regardless of cost. For the ones that are exempt based on cost, it's defined in interpretation of regulation IRA-10, and that only applies, those projects only apply to alterations to DSA certified buildings, not new construction. So if you're putting a shade structure on your school site, regardless of cost, it's not exempt. You still have to submit to DSA for structural fire and access review. But if you are doing an alteration to a DSA certified building, the current cost limit, it just got increased, it's increased every year due to inflation. The current cost limit is $103,300. So if you're doing an alteration project under that amount, you're not required to submit to DSA. You can if you'd like to, but it's not required. There's another category of projects defined in IRA-10 that if the cost is over $103,300 and less than $232,425, it's exempt, but it has to meet certain criteria. And one is that there's no structural work. In that case, you need to submit a letter from a structural engineer indicating there's no structural work. You need to submit that to DSA. But there's also three other requirements. There's no work regulated by access standards, no work triggering access upgrades, and it meets all the fire and life safety standards. Very few projects meet that criteria, especially the ones, alteration projects that are not regulated by access standards. Nearly all projects are regulated by access standards. So I see maybe one of those a year get submitted to DSA, not very often. There also is a requirement for inspection, and the project inspector, even though there's no approved plans, they're supposed to submit a Form 999 to DSA that it was inspected to the unapproved plan. So those are the exemptions based on project cost. The exemptions based on scope are defined, most of them in IRA-22. At the end of that document, there's a matrix with 30 different types of construction listed, and then 3 different columns, one for structural, one for fire, one for access, and under each one there'll be a yes or no. So you look at the checkbox to see if that particular discipline is required or not for that scope of work. On that, you might, it's important to look at the footnotes in the table, because the footnotes can change whether it's required or not. For HVAC replacement projects, there's a few different criteria in the footnote, and you have to meet all those criteria for your HVAC replacement project to be exempt.
Dan, just want to make sure we emphasize everything still must be built, whether it's exempt from our review or not, in accordance with current code. That you have to remember that, and that means that you must have an inspector on the project, and we need to keep emphasizing that, because some people come back and say, well, it's exempt, I don't have to follow the code, and I don't have to have an inspector. Wrong. You have to do that.
Yeah, that's true. So I think it's a common misconception that if you don't have to submit to DSA, you don't have to meet the code. So the district's still required to hire a design professional to design it and have an inspector to do the inspection. There's another document that lists exempt projects that's not in any of the DSA IRs or policies, and that's in Part 1 of Title 24. Part 1 is the administrative regulations. If you don't have that, I suggest everyone get that. It's not a very big book. It's about this big. It's published by ICC, just like the building code, the mechanical, electrical, plumbing codes. And there's one chapter, Chapter 4 has the structural and fire administrative requirements for school construction. Chapter 5 has the access compliance administrative requirements. There's other chapters too for hospitals and essential service buildings, but take a look at that. It's not very long. I think the Structural portions, 28 pages, the fire portion's 3 pages, and the access part is 5 pages. But there's a lot of good information in there. It'll have responsibilities of the inspector, the contractor, the school district. So it's good information. 2 sections in there deal with exempt projects that aren't in other publications that DSA has. One is section 4-314. It's definitions. If you look under definition of school building, it lists a whole paragraph of types of work that are exempt. So it would say light poles under 35 feet are exempt, retaining walls under 4 feet are exempt, but that's in the structural chapter, so they're just, those things may just be exempt from structural and fire review. You'd have to check with us to see if they're also exempt from access. Most things require access review. Then in section 4-310, it talks about storage buildings and other buildings not to be used by students and teachers. It specifically says there you have to submit that for DSA access review. But they can be exempt from structural and fire review, but you have to do 3 things. The district has to pass a resolution saying that the building will not be used or entered by students and teachers, or they won't be subject to a hazard resulting from its collapse. You have to post it with a sign saying it doesn't meet the state earthquake safety requirements. And then the district does have to have a method to prevent injuries to students or teachers as a result of collapse of the building. And that's typically done by fencing off the building with the distance between the fence and the building equal to the height of the building. So take a look at that. Those are the, just determine if your project's exempt or not. And if you have questions, call me, call one of the supervisors I introduced, and they can let you know for sure. And so these slides are pretty much set up as a project goes through the process. So if your project's not exempt, you do need to come in for a preliminary meeting. It's optional, but we highly recommend it. And not just the architect to come, but school district facility staff. It really helps to have everyone involved in the project there at the preliminary meeting. We'll talk about the design criteria, the scope of your project, and code interpretations. In order to set up a preliminary meeting, we have a form for that. For the Sacramento Regional Office, it's Form 92. For Oakland office, it's 91. In LA, it's 93. In San Diego, it's 94. So you fill out the form, and it asks information about the project. You put certain dates, a few different dates you might want to have your preliminary meeting and come into the office. And also questions you have. Any technical questions, code interpretations, you'd put down there, and then getting that, and then hit submit. In our office, it goes to Sal Duda, who I introduced, and either he will contact you to confirm a date for the meeting, or one of the other supervisors will. And it helps to have the questions ahead of time. It makes the meeting more productive because our staff can do research on the questions, hopefully have answers by the time you come. And we'd suggest you bring schematic drawings and do it the schematic design phase. And we can have senior structural fire and access staff in the meeting. We can answer any of the questions you have. And our staff will also look at the drawings to see if they see issues that you may need to consider in the design. So we'll look at code interpretations. It really helps because if DSA has a different code interpretation on a section than your designer does, the design can go down the wrong path, and if you don't have the preliminary meeting, you submit the documents, and then it may have to be redesigned. So it saves everybody a lot of time. If you have the preliminary meeting, we all start off on the right foot. There's also
just want to add something. We have extended box to the beginning of a project. So at this meeting, whatever documents, whatever minutes are taken and notes put together can go into the box, so you've got a record of it. And quite frankly, when you submit the drawings and there's some kind of a conflict, and you can turn around and say, wait a second, we agreed on this particular piece, here's the written statement, or here's the drawing, et cetera, et cetera. So we're trying to make it a little bit smoother for everybody involved.
Right, and so at the end of the meeting, we'll ask you, the architect, to provide meeting minutes and send those to us. We'll review the meeting minutes and provide comments, and then at the end, there'll be approved meeting minutes. And we'll keep those, but we'll also ask you to submit, say, 3 sets of the meeting minutes. That way, when we distribute the structural fire and access plan review sets, we can make sure the meeting minutes are with those of the plan reviewer season. So there's a question back there?
Who puts it in the box? Is that the district's responsibility or DSA's responsibility? The preliminary meeting documentation.
The meeting minutes? I think
Any and all of it that gets disseminated then?
I think we asked the architect to prepare the meeting minutes, and they should have access to box so they could upload the meeting minutes.
And remember that everything that goes into Box is dated so that, as an example, if the architect does submit it and then DSA looks at it and makes a revision or some comments on it, that'll all be put in there and it'll be dated, et cetera. So we've got a running record of everything that occurred. And if there's any conflicts, we can always go back and look at it and say, ah, you're right, or no, you're wrong, or what have you.